Good morning. I'm Rebecca Snyder, Executive Director of MDDC, and I am so delighted today to have Tom Ferraro, who is a veteran journalist, with us to talk about his award-winning series on mounting homelessness in America. This is sort of a special edition for us. Our masterclass series really examines the stories behind award-winning work from the MDDC contest. So, welcome, Tom.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you, and I'm really interested in how this series came about. So, can you tell us a little bit about your award-winning work, which was featured in Maryland Matters? If anybody wants to hunt down that series, you can just search Tom Ferraro, Ferraro, at Maryland Matters, and you'll see his four-part series on homelessness. But tell us a little bit about the series, Tom.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Maryland Matters because that was the key. They ran it, and I
Always good.
and I wrote it as a freelancer, so you never know. But how it came about was I was a reporter for going on better than 45 years, most of it in Washington D.C. And then when I retired, I enjoyed writing. I find it relaxing. Some people like to golf. I like to write. Um, so. So I freelanced, and what I also did was I volunteered at some nonprofit anti-poverty places like AmeriCorps Vista. I did there a couple of years, and then more recently, I volunteered at the Community Action Agency of Anne Arundel County, which is a nonpartisan anti-poverty group. And when I met with them, they asked me to write for their community monthly newsletter um, and then they gave me the topic, homelessness. And I got to tell you, when they first told me they wanted me to write about homelessness, I was totally uninspired because I thought it was an old topic that had been discussed for years. And it was like, what am I going to write about?
Yeah. Well, and I'm interested there because homelessness has it seems so ripe for like personal stories. There's always a story behind that homelessness.
Oh, yeah.
And I, I I'm interested that you felt like there wasn't really anything new that you could bring to the table. Like, is that because you were more data driven or what's behind
No, because I was naive. And but
that happens too.
so I started digging into it, and the more I dug into it, the more interested I became because I saw it's a growing problem, not a decreasing problem.
Hmm.
And it's a human problem. It's a problem with, all age groups. It's just not, and so I got into it and I asked questions and I talked to people. And, the great thing nowadays for journalists, reporters is Google. You can Google everything. So I started Googling and I found I like to go with federal reports. HUD, HUD does
Uh-huh.
an annual count on the number of homeless in the United States. They count one night in January, and they found anyway. It's increased. I don't want to tell you with statistics, but they found over 600,000 on a single night in January, um, and 5,000 of them in Maryland. And that's an increase from that was an increase from the previous year. It's actually increased just one figure. It's increased like 12% from um, from 22 to 24, from
So,
2022 to 2024. And the reason for that is that an explosion in the cost of living. There's a
hmm
shortage of houses and there's a rising cost.
hmm
Um, and it's expensive to find a place. But as you say, so then I had the statistics, I had the story. It's an increasing problem, and I started to go to I visited homeless shelters to talk to people at the homeless shelter who run the homeless shelter, ask them about their clients, who these people are. And what I remember, what struck me my first visit was most people never expected that they would be homeless.
Right. Well,
And
that is, I mean, no one really ever grows up thinking like, oh, I'm going to be homeless or I'm going to have,
no,
some dreadful thing happen.
yeah. Yeah, and one right, you're absolutely right. They don't expect to be homeless, and so I started talking to some of the homeless, and one of the people I talked to, one fa family I was met was they were living in a two-bedroom apartment, and the husband and wife both worked, two boys in high school, and the landlord announced to them a surprise that she wasn't going to renew the lease. She wanted to sell the unit so they'd have to move.
Oh,
And then unfortunately at the same time they got COVID, and then the husband lost his job, and then they were homeless. So homeless, when you think homeless, you think people sleeping in a park or in a car, but there's also people who are homeless and they go from couch to couch, from friend to friend.
hmm.
So this family of four, they went from couch to couch um, with family and friends. And what the school system does, like last year in Anne Arundel County, well, last year in the state of Maryland, there were 15,000 homeless kids. Now, they weren't homeless. I'm not sure if any were homeless for the entire year, but a lot of them were homeless for weeks or even months. This one family I'm talking about, they were homeless 7 months. In the school system, um, they're prepared for this. They have a special division that deals with homeless kids,
Hmm.
and they don't announce it to the school. They don't tell the school, but the officials at the school, in the department know, and they set it up so that the kids could stay in their same school, even though they were living far away from the school with family and friends. The hardship on the kids were they'd have to go be on multiple buses to make it to class.
Right.
Uh,
So I'm interested. I just wanted to step back because in the idea of the series, you didn't know that this would be a series, but you had something that was important to write about. And I want to understand how you, as a journalist, think through like all the paths that you could take. I mean, just in the story that you were telling about that particular family, you've got themes of education, transportation, the housing market and landlords who want to make good on their investment and their property. I mean, there's
right,
nothing wrong with wanting to sell a property. You've got healthcare because of COVID. You even have working supports that, d maybe the husband, if there was better paid leave, he might not have lost his job. So how do you just, that's five or six things right there off the top of my head that are enmeshed in that story. And when you start to write on a topic like this, do you have in your head how you're going to pull those threads or what you're going to do? Or do you just kind of go in blind to say, this sounds like a story here. I want to see where it goes.
uh, to me, it sounded like a story, and I want to know more about it.
Hmm.
So I didn't. When I started, I didn't think, hey, four-part series. I was going to do four stories. I thought I was going to do one. I was going to do the first story the best I could and go from there. And what
Hmm.
happened was, first I wrote the story for the community newsletter, and they wanted 500 words, and I had more to tell.
Oh yeah, 500. That's
That's
nothing.
not enough. So I had written earlier as a volunteer at AARP Maryland. I had written earlier for Maryland Matters on the topic of um, the problem with the elderly voting, getting
Hmm.
getting to the voting station. So I knew Maryland Matters took freelance, and I knew people on the Hill, in the Maryland General Assembly read it. I knew it was a respected publication that was read.
Hmm.
So I pitched it to them, and when they ran it, um, I was thrilled. So that motivated me to, to keep on writing for the community newsletter, but then write another story for the Maryland Matters. My first story was just like an introduction to me to the topic.
Hmm.
It was and um, one of the people at one of the shelters told me, there a lot of homeless hide in plain sight. You don't even know they're homeless. They
Hmm.
come to work, they come to school. You don't know that they're sleeping on the couch, or you don't know some nights maybe they're sleeping in a car, but they're hiding in plain sight, and they're struggling with this, and there they are. And the the poignant thing was the just some of the quotes I got from folks. Um, this this is from the Anne Arundel and Annapolis have a coalition to end homelessness.
Hmm.
And this is from one of their spokespersons. The image of the homeless is someone who makes bad choices, but a lot of times that's not the case. People are doing the best they can with what they have. And, that just rang true from what I saw and who I talked to. Um,
And that sounds like such a great through line for sort of an accidental series. You didn't necessarily plan on writing a series, and
right.
how do you make those pieces hang together? Like, was that when you heard that quote, that sort of just to me says you can tell the stories about how people are doing the best that they can and still ending up with this result of being unhoused. um
Right.
did you kind of think through some of those pieces, or did you just say, okay, it's I had a story drop in April and now it's May, let's see if they'll take another one? Did you
Well,
put
yeah.
the issue front and
Well,
center?
I knew, fortunately for me, things were going on the homeless topic. The Supreme Court took a case this past year, into 2024, where they ruled, acting on that a community could, if a homeless person is sleeping in a public park, they could get arrested and fined. And the
Right.
Supreme Court said that's okay. I'm proud. I mean, not proud. In Maryland, the Maryland Attorney General filed a friend of the court brief against that, saying that we shouldn't criminalize people's misfortune. But the Supreme Court didn't agree. But the head of the coalition to end homelessness for Anne Arundel County, he said he didn't think many communities were going to enforce it, and he didn't think many cops wanted to ticket people.
Hmm.
So he wasn't particularly anyway. He wasn't particularly concerned. I didn't do a follow-up story to see if anybody's been arrested. Um, I would be surprised if more than a few have, but it'd probably be worth taking a look a year after the Supreme Court ruling.
Hmm.
Um, I want to tell you an anecdote on my second story. Um, the I was now if somebody told me this, I'm not sure I'd believe them, but it is the truth. It is the truth, and I don't make up stuff. But I was actually driving my car to the State House for signing of legislation that was backed by AARP
Hmm.
when I worked there as an advocate. So I'm going to the State House, but I'm running way behind. Part of the reason anyway, I was running way behind, and I realized I wasn't going to make it. So I figured, screw it. And at the same time, I'm listening to the radio, the oral arguments on the homeless case before the Supreme Court. So I pull over on the side of the road, and I'm listening to the radio. I bought a cup of coffee, and a woman knocks on the window of my car, and she says, "Have you ever been homeless?" And I got chills,
Mm,
and I sort of like looked skyward. It was like, what is going on? So I opened the window, and the woman repeated herself, "Have you ever been homeless?" She was homeless,
uh,
and she was looking for help. And coincidentally, the previous Sunday, I was at church and they gave out bags, relief bags for the homeless, you know,
hmm
snacks, water, um, cleaning materials. So I gave her a bag and I started
hmm
talking to her. And I had a tape recorder on the seat since I was going to the State House for this bill signing. So I talked to her for a while and she explained she's been homeless since she lost her job. And she's able to she's able to sleep in a building on weekends in the lobby, but she's got to be out by Monday morning. And
I remember this from your series. Yeah.
so it was just, it was just chilling that, she found me, I didn't find her.
hmm
And, and then from her, I explained to her that she could go to the Annapolis shelter where she could clean up, wash up, and get in line to be able to live there for a while.
hmm
Um, I drove over the following weeks. I drove by there several times more to see if I could find her. I didn't see her. I don't know what happened to her. I hope she's okay. But there's so many like that, like her, who
Right.
suddenly find themselves unemployed and unhoused.
Well, and it feels like, Tom, you were really affected by some of the interactions that you had. And so as a journalist, I'm wondering, and you obviously feel really compelled by the topic you're working on, anti-poverty issues, sort of in your free time and your for your activist piece. Where, how do you how do you see, or as a journalist, how do you work through when you're personally feeling called to a particular issue? Um, are there any considerations that you have in terms of balancing the journalism aspect versus the activist um, aspect of yourself?
Um, it's not it's it's helping somebody in need. It's not like, I know you didn't mean this, but it's not like, you're covering a campaign and you think, hey, I like this guy. I think he should win. So I'll write a
Right. It's
good
not thumb
story
on the
about him.
scale kind
Yeah.
of.
So that's way out of bounds. That's out of bounds. But to write about homelessness and talk to these people and shed a tear is not bias. It's human.
Hmm
So I did, I did shed it. I did shed tears in talking to some of these people and hearing their stories, but I didn't feel it adversely affected the story. I think it helped drive me to do another story,
hmm
to find more about what's going on. And when we you know at one point, the school year, the when I went to the first place, the shelter, the woman at the shelter told me that the X number of kids are homeless and come home from school. No, how did she explain it? Her quote was, thousands of kids go to school each day not knowing where they're going to sleep.
Mm,
And that rattled me. So my next story was on homeless school kids.
hmm
And then, I spent a lot of time researching that. And one of the problems nowadays as a reporter is people don't answer their phones.
Oh, that is true.
So I kept on calling the, the Maryland Department of Education and get stats on homeless kids. And I didn't, I finally, I was able to swap a couple of emails, but I never talked to anybody. But I did talk to the special office that handles homeless kids, and they were very, very, very helpful. But and then a problem of of being a freelancer. I invested a lot of time on doing a story about homeless school kids. And
Hmm.
I talked to the mother of the family and got all the statistics. And then I filed the story. At this point, Maryland Matters had run two stories, and I submitted this one, and a week went by, 2 weeks went by. They didn't run the story, and I was so disappointed. I thought that was the best story about
Right.
kids. And then I got a call from Steve Crane. I didn't, I didn't get a call from him. Nobody talks on the phone anymore. I got an
You
email
got an email.
I got an email from Steve Crane with a question saying, okay, he was ready to run it. It was at least a month after I filed it. Did I have any updates? So I said, yeah, I got an update. So I wanted to flip something around, and he ran it. So I was thrilled, more relieved than thrilled that the story got to be told.
Hmm.
And then
It strikes me in this conversation that, you let yourself be open and have sort of like the stories touch your humanity to know what would resonate with readers, and then you bolstered that with data. So it wasn't just a like, oh, this touched Tom's heart, I'm going to write about this, but you found an angle that you thought was particularly compelling, and then you went and did sort of that background to say, hey, okay, what's really going on here as a trend or statistics? Is that Have you found success in that way, or is that sort of you've obviously written and reported a long time for a long time. Has that been a successful strategy for you just in
yeah,
general?
I like to get if I get in the topic and I like the topic, I want to get immersed in the topic, and then
Hmm.
I can pick and choose what I'm going to write about. So I could pick, and as you say, the human stories. A guy who was he was a successful professional, and he lost his wife, and then he started drinking. And yes, you could guess the end of the story. He became homeless. Um, and the mother and her son who were living in an apartment, and even with their combined income, they couldn't afford it. And you know what we learned too? There's a I would there's a lot of homeless who are working. They got jobs, they just can't afford an apartment. An apartment in Anne Arundel County, two-bedroom apartment is like I think it's 1,900 or maybe even more than 2,000 bucks. So you'd have to be making double the minimum wage to be able to afford it. So obviously you got to double up. Um,
And so when you were, I'm interested because you're right. We do talk a lot about like homelessness, and you think, oh well, gosh, that's just a lack of, sometimes lack of money or whatnot. Um, are there how does that I'm thinking just about there's just not enough housing out there as well. Did you look
right.
into sort of the economic development, and certainly in some jurisdictions you have so much money being funneled into like the show places. I'm thinking of like TIFFs in Baltimore City or the
Oh
waterfront, but
yeah.
around affordable housing, are you feeling like there's a real groundswell? I mean, or is this kind of just the silent, uh, what's
Well,
really
it's reached the attention of when the Maryland General Assembly. Well, let me start off with the Anne Arundel County Executive, Stuart Pittman. He's a former community organizer for the poor.
really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Oh, that's
he was
true.
very attentive. He was attentive to this, and he proposed I wrote this so I guess it was 2023. He proposed requiring builders to include affordable housing for essential workers, nurses, teachers, police officers, and any new development.
Hmm.
It lost. The
So why, I mean, that seems
county
like such a
council
common
defeated.
sense thing. Does that get hung up in like what's an essential person or
Well, the churches backed it, labor backed it, civil rights backed it, and the developers pushed back.
mm,
And the county council defeated it 4-3.
wow, that was
And
close.
then Maryland Governor Wes Moore, uh, he sent legislation backed by Pittman to the General Assembly to address the housing crisis by building and creating more affordable housing. Um, he signed the legislation. He said, at the time he signed it, the Maryland's estimated housing shortage was 96,000 units. Then I
Has that gone up or gone down? I mean,
gone
that
up.
96,000 units is a lot.
Yeah, 96,000 is a lot, and it's gone up.
Okay.
I spoke to someone for another housing group, and she said she estimates the figure's probably 110 now. So it's a problem. It's a growing problem, and sadly, it's going to be a worse problem. One of the things the Trump administration eliminated or gutted was an agency that helped coordinate efforts to help the homeless. And they've also, they're a lot of their programs are just going to it's going to increase. It's going to they're cutting Medicaid. Poverty is going to increase
Mm.
among the most vulnerable to the cuts are the vulnerable. Um, so poverty is going to increase. Homelessness is going to increase.
Well, and this might be a statistic from the Wayback Machine, but I perceive that one of the leading causes of bankruptcy is healthcare debt. And so if and just going back to the first story that you wrote in this series, you know, one of the real one of the ways that that family went into being unhoused was because the father lost his job because of a health because of
Yeah,
COVID, um, being ill. And so it's there's such big issues. And so it sounds like your tack to kind of make it explainable really is to concentrate on the stories and use that as a way to get into those bigger issues. Um, I'm also, you've had a long career. You've worked for a lot of different news organizations. And how did you, and when you retired, you said you like to write, but how did you kind of keep in that mix? I mean, you're basically still a journalist, and sort of it's almost like you're the pro bono journalist for particular issues. Did you kind of set out to do that, or what were your thoughts around that?
well, when I first retired, I went to AmeriCorps Vista, the anti-poverty group, and I served and it was an education. My first, what AmeriCorps Vista does is it puts you at a nonprofit as an employee, as an employee. You're a
Okay.
volunteer, but you work 40 hours a week, um, and you get paid. Um, it was less than 20. Anyway, it wasn't much, but anyway, I worked there. But it was an education. Oh, the first part of the education was I got assigned to a nonprofit in Howard County, Maryland.
Hmm.
Howard County is one of the most wealthy counties, one of the most wealthy counties in the country, and they have poverty. So, I mean, I learned a lesson before I even got there that poverty is everywhere.
Mm.
It's in Howard County. And it's the same with Anne Arundel County. Anne Arundel County is one of the wealthiest counties in the state, and it's got poverty. It's got homelessness. Um, so I'm not sure I answered the question, but it was just like diving in. And once I'm in the water, once I'm there, just looking around, there's a story here, there's a story here, there's a story there.
Hmm.
Um, what happened on I'm sorry, did I answer your question or?
Yeah, because I was just, it feels like you're now a, like the beat reporter for Tom Ferraro, passion projects, uh, on homelessness now. And it feels like you're really cultivating that topic like you would a beat. You're just not necessarily doing it for a
Yeah,
particular
that's
publication.
interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting way you put it. Yeah, that's been my most since I left as a freelancer. That's been my biggest interest. Although I've done, I've done I did a profile of Jimmy Fox. Jimmy Fox was a baseball player.
Oh, okay, thank you. I did not know
He lived
that.
he lived on the Eastern Shore,
Okay.
so it was a local story.
Hmm.
Um, and then I've done stories for AARP on Tai Chi and on growing old. So it's
Hmm.
just not just all my stories aren't on the aren't on poverty, but the ones I've really gotten into is poverty. The one, I did those three stories, and then toward the end of the year, I found out that the that each December, uh, homeless advocate groups hold what they call the longest night.
Mm.
And the longest night is held. The longest night is actually the longest night, and it's in December. I think it's December 21st.
It's the solstice.
Yeah, and it's the longest night, and it's the longest night for the homeless on the street.
Hmm.
So they read off their names.
Mm.
So I found out where they were going to read off the names in Annapolis, and I went there
Hmm.
and I talked to the head of the coalition and homelessness. He emceed it. They drew a crowd of a couple of hundred. It was cold, and they read off the names. And then I wrote the story, and I'll show you how I wrote the story.
Now, was that the names of all homeless people or people who had
It
died
was
from this hole?
it was the homeless people who had died in 2024 in Anne Arundel County,
Oh.
and there were 21 of them,
Mm.
and
That's a lot more than I had expected.
it's a lot of people. And here's the way I began the story. Earl Johnson, Brian Ward, Nicholas Jerry. They're among the 21 men and women identified as having died homeless this year in Anne Arundel County, one of the wealthiest areas in Maryland, one of the most prosperous states in the nation, one of the richest places on earth. Homelessness is everywhere. Jesus Hernandez, Brian Parker, Stephen Boudreau. Last Saturday, December 21, the first night of winter, the longest night of the year, and the longest night for people on the street. Speakers read their names, a roll call of the dead in People's Park. The longest night homeless persons memorial service held annually since 2013 was one of more than 2,200 such services held in cities nationwide. And then I, read a couple more names and another graph of facts about it. Um,
Just, stylistically, that's such a great cadence to really draw a reader in and sort of slip in some of those broadening facts.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was ex I was ex I wrote the story, and then I'm thinking, okay, is Steve Crane going to run it? And I was thrilled because it would happen on the 21st. Um, it was timely. You couldn't run it in February.
Right, exactly.
So Steve Crane, he ran it
Hmm.
and he liked it. And I said, well, since you like it, could I add a paragraph? He said, okay, what's the paragraph you want to add? I said, at the end, I got a quote from Berlusconi, the head of the coalition, saying they all, after saying three more names, and then Berlusconi said they all have stories. They all had people who loved them. And then I say in the story, then the crowd of about 100 bundled together against the cold, together sang slowly, Silent Night.
Mm,
And that's how the story ended. But it was again, I was thankful for thankful to Steve Crane and the Maryland Matters that they ran it.
sure. Well, it sounds like such a powerful series. Have you gotten feedback from the series? Because, obviously it's now been out in the world for some time, and there's a lot going on with that series.
Well, I was encouraged, heartened that others have picked it up.
Hmm.
Maryland Matters ran it, and Maryland Matters, I guess, is with a conglomerate of
Right, the state's
uh,
newsroom.
yeah.
Yeah.
So others, I think Yahoo News Service ran it.
Oh,
Some
so it
other,
really got some broader traction then.
yeah, yeah, it did, it did. So I was pleasantly thrilled. And
I
surprised.
bet. So
Yeah.
then what's next? Are you still writing for are you still writing about homelessness, or are you turning your attention to other topics?
I would, I would still want to write about poverty.
Hmm.
Um, I want to write about just other elements of poverty. I read I'm reading or began to read a book on poverty, and it just goes into the fact that the United States is the richest country in the world, and poverty remains and is getting worse.
Hmm.
Um, it's not, it hasn't been it just hasn't been recognized enough as everybody's problem. Um, and at the same time, you got a Supreme Court decision saying people could be arrested and fined for being homeless. That doesn't seem to be the right direction to go.
It does seem like it will just pile things on. I mean, if you're finding people or jailing people, that's not getting them. A
Yeah.
lot of it is so much of it is about just the sheer economics.
Yeah, I also, right. And I also think being a reporter, like I say reporter, you say journalist. I go with a reporter. Um,
Go
because,
for it. What's the difference actually in your mind?
well, in my mind, journalist is like a fancy $10 word for a reporter.
Okay.
A reporter, I say a reporter is a guy or gal with a notebook and a pen, reporting on what's going on. Journalists, when you turn on TV and you have these journalists around pontificating their opinions, reporters deal with facts. Journalists like to swap their opinions with each other. That's
Okay.
too harsh on my part. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, that's why I was interested in what you saw as the difference. So the
And
reporters.
also journalists, you have journalist ends IST. You have scientists, dentists, botanists.
Mhm.
Those guys got advanced degrees. Reporters don't need advanced degrees. They need a desire to tell the truth and to tell a story and tell it well. One of the greatest reporters of the 20th century was Bernstein,
Mhm.
and he didn't go to college.
Mhm.
And he proved you don't have to go to college. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going to college. It's great. It's a great experience. It's great. I, it's highly recommended. But I just see reporter as somebody who just reports what's going on and does it as well as and accurately as possible.
I love that. Okay. So as a reporter then, sorry to tangent.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry, as a reporter, your
Well,
question.
as a reporter, I sort of pulled you off track. You were making a point about sort of what you how you were focusing on anti-poverty reporting at this point.
Yeah. Well, because there's so much to write about,
Hmm.
and sadly, Trump has made it worse, is making it worse,
Hmm.
and he continues to make it worse. Um, you're gonna have more, you're gonna have more kids, with what he does, what he's done, you're gonna have, you can expect to have more kids homeless.
Hmm.
And if you have, and kids are the most, kids are the most vulnerable to his cuts when they're at a formative period in their life. And the sad thing too is if you invest in kids, you get you more than your money back.
Right.
If you shortchange them, they're going to cost you in the long run because they're less apt to graduate high school. They're less apt to get a job, more apt to have all sorts of problems, and more apt to be a burden rather than an asset to society. So
Right.
it's, shortchanging them. You might think you're saving a couple of bucks by not extending programs for them. But I mean, they're even cutting a program to curb gun control, to expand gun control, curb gun violence. And gun violence is a leading cause of death among young people.
Hmm.
So how does that make financial sense? Um,
Well,
and kids too. Yeah, so I'm interested in poverty, and I'm interested in kids' poverty because kids are the most vulnerable. Just simply stated, they don't vote.
hmm.
They don't have PACs. They're not on Capitol Hill shaping policy. It's no accident that the United States is the richest country in the world in a growing gap between rich and poor because Congress has legislated advantages to the rich. And they're going to the legislation going through now will even make them richer with more and more tax cuts for the rich.
So it's in this sort of new area. Well, it's not really a new area that you're heading into, but it feels like you're doing a very reporter thing, which is standing up for people whose voices aren't being heard. When
But
you,
I don't see myself being all that noble about it. As a reporter, I'm writing a good story. That's what I'm doing. But
well,
it's,
and that truly is, you did it with the series, and I think that's thank you for that work. I can't wait to see what else you do. Is there anything that you wanted, as we kind of close out, is there anything else that you wanted to share about series writing or about the topic?
I would just encourage any young reporter to report, and wherever they are, there's a good story. Um, could I quote Deadline, the old movie Deadline Every Minute was about journalism. And Humphrey Bogart was a city editor of this newspaper, it's city newspaper. And he had a young reporter, and he told the kid, journalism, he didn't say journalism, he said, it isn't the oldest business in the world, but it's the best.
Mm.
And I agree with Humphrey Bogart. It's the
True
best.
word.
So
True
enjoy.
words. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. It's been terrific to hear about what you're doing, and can't wait to read your next series, award-winning series, hopefully in Maryland Matters.
Okay, well,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for your time. Thank you for what you do.